All right, last class period, we covered social learning, and I said that that was the big picture item for the week. And typically, I'll cover the major theory and then a related topic that's going to relate to what we're doing in class, but it also connects to the major theory for the week. Let's do a quick review so that you can see how these topics are interconnected. So last class period, we talked about Vygotsky, a popular researcher in social learning theory. He liked to use Socratic method to make sure students were actively engaged. And what that is just having a conversation with students about the topic. Because you truly have to understand something to be actively engaged. And if you don't understand it, the person teaching the concept can pick up on that and help enlighten that individual, to elaborate on the topic so that they do understand. And we broke social learning up into collaborative learning, having no leader, and cooperative learning. And we were going to need this for group work and for the activity that we were going to do in class. I wanted you to kind of test those two and see which of those methods of social learning were you using in your group. Then we talked about zone of proximal development. And I said we're going to come back to this theory later in the semester when we get to experiential learning theory. But each time we do an activity, as we move through the semester, what I want you to do is pick up on those things that you think you could have done independently with very little instruction. And then look at those activities that you would have needed somebody to guide you through the process, either a teacher or a peer. And we're going to have some activities, even after I provide the instruction, that you can't do even if guided. You may have to have some of your group members. You're just not there yet. But over time, with practice, you can get there. So this is more of the activities connected, but it's definitely connected to one of the major theories that we're going to cover in class. Now, for today's lesson, we're going to talk about leadership. And leadership is directly connected to things that you can do if guided by teachers or peers, because they're going to lead you through the process and help you out and kind of instruct you along the way and guide you through that process. And then obviously it's connected to types of leadership. So if you have a defined leader, that would be cooperative, then that's your connection to leadership. And there's going to be some groups that don't have a defined leader, and you're going to see the impact that has, positive and negative, of having a leader and not having a leader. There's benefits to both, and then there's drawbacks to both. And so that's connected right here to zone of proximal development. But for today's lesson, let's talk more about leadership. Now, there are a bunch of different models of leadership, and I'm not going to cover all of those in class, just the ones that most people can directly relate to. So yes, you have transactional leaders, transformational leaders, you have empathic leadership, you have a bunch of different models. But let's get into the big picture items on leadership. You have authoritarian, you have democratic, and you have delegative. We'll get to situational in just a second. So authoritarian would be giving out commands. And you may need that for your group. Maybe you have a bunch of people that are not motivated and they really have to be guided and motivated through the process. In that case, you want somebody that can take charge, get your group motivated, and get something done. So places like the military, police force, especially when lives are on the line and you have to make quick decisions, authoritarian can be best. Now, it can be used in educational settings, in business settings, and it often is, but it may not be the best approach for educated people because you may get some pushback. And it may work initially, but eventually people are going to become resentful. So it has some positives and it has some drawbacks. So if we were in the military and we had to take a hill or take a building, we don't have the time to take a vote and say, all right, who's going to charge this building with me? Because then I would be the only one going into that building. So you have to have a defined leader that gives commands. And if you were attacked, you have to have somebody that can yell out those commands and tell people what to do. So that would be the benefit of authoritarian. Then you have democratic. And you'll see this in educational settings. People that are highly educated really love democratic leadership. It has its benefits and it has its drawbacks, mainly because they don't like being told what to do. So places like Google or Apple, when you get highly educated people in a room, or even in an educational setting, people like to put a vote. Democratic leadership is great when you have time. So you may find that your group takes a vote on who's going to do this part of the activity, who's going to do the editing, who's going to videotape the activity, who's actually going to perform the activity. That could be a democratic process. And I think you'll get more group buy-in if everybody gets to choose their role within the group. So that's your benefit to choosing democratic. And then you have delegative. You've got to be really careful how you use delegative leadership. If you just walk in and start giving or sorting out responsibilities within a group without any group buy-in, again, with highly educated people, they're going to be resistant to that. And people are going to resent you if they see you setting back, watching everybody do these activities and you're not doing anything other than being some sort of manager. So delegative can be problematic. It's also called laissez-faire. People can see you as lazy as a leader if that's all you ever use is delegative leadership. We're going to get to situational in just a second, but let's talk about the overlap. Just like we had overlap between cooperative and collaborative group work, we also have overlap between leadership models. So what I mean by overlap is up here when we were talking about cooperative learning and collaborative learning, there were some commonalities between the two. There was some shared variance if you want to get into the stats world with it. So this is your Venn diagram that shows what's common between the two. So with authoritarian, you can be delegative. What I mean by that is you could say, you go do this, you go do that, you do this part of this activity, you do this part of activity, where you're just delegating out responsibilities, but you're being authoritarian about it. You're not giving somebody a choice. The problem with that is, yes, it's useful when you need to get things done quickly, but again, people can become resentful, and you may be putting somebody on their weakest area. So there may be somebody in your group that is terrible at hands-on activities, and you've just delegated their responsibility of doing that activity. And so they're going to be resentful. They're not going to be motivated to do it. Then you have democratic delegative. So that would be something that you would definitely see at Google, Apple, in higher education. And here's an example. So let's say I'm in your group, and I say, hey, I'm decent at video editing. I'm also fairly good at kinesthetic learning. Where would y'all want me to be? So you're kind of guiding the conversation, but you're giving them a choice in the process. And so you might kind of survey your group, and maybe there's nobody in that group that's a hands-on learner. So you're like, okay, even though I'm good at editing, I'm going to take the role of this hands-on activity, but I'm going to need somebody to hold these pieces of equipment together while I demo it. So I'm going to need somebody else to help me who's willing to help. And then if somebody raises their hand, you've given them a choice to participate and where they're going to participate. You can say, okay, we've got to get this activity not only completed, but we need somebody to film it. Who's good at, or who has a really good camera, who's willing to film? If somebody raises their hand, all right, great. Why don't you do that part? And then you could say, all right, who's good at editing video? I'm okay at it and I can help you, but who wants to take on that primary responsibility of editing the video and uploading it to Canvas for our group? And if somebody raises their hand and nobody else does, you can say, yeah, even though I'm going to do the activity, I'm going to help you with that portion of it too because I'm good, but you're going to take on the main responsibility of getting that chopped together. If you need some help, let me know. So that would be democratic delegative. Now, let's get to situational leadership. It's my favorite form of leadership because there are times where I have to be authoritarian. I have to make quick decisions. Even in a classroom, I have to make quick, unilateral decisions. I don't have time for a vote. It has to be authoritarian. And it could be authoritarian delegative, where I delegate out responsibilities. So it could be a combination of those two. But I like to be democratic as much as possible. It's not always possible, but vast majority of times, especially if I'm in a meeting or if I'm working with students in class, I can be democratic. We have time. Our life is not on the line. We don't have to make quick decisions. I'm going to go with democratic. So what I'm getting at, it depends on the situation that you find yourself in, on what leadership role you're going to take. And you may find with your group work, sometimes you have to be authoritarian if you're the leader. Sometimes you have time to be democratic. And between both of those, you may have to delegate responsibilities out. So don't think that these are the only types of leadership, but they are the most popular, and I think they're the ones that apply most to what we're doing in class. So I want to keep these videos short. This would be the second day of this week when we cover social learning. And that will bring us to the next part of the week, or next week.